So we're going to talk about a few, tangible applications of generative AI today. And I'm not going to run through this entire scenario. But it is based in a scenario. And so I'm going to just briefly give you an overview of what's happening so that you can orient yourself a little bit in the scenario that we're dealing with. And then I'm going to just highlight the parts that are really focused around generative AI. And then we're going to actually build something new together really quick um, to show how quick we can go from basically 0 to 1 on a use case. So here we are. We have a few minutes ago, actually, I made a commit while Kyle was talking, and I was a little distracted because he's talking about all this exciting stuff. Um, I'm not really sure if I made good code changes or bad ones. Unfortunately, I made a mistake, and that is going to cause some breakage in a website that we have where normally it would recommend, it's like an e-com thing. So normally it would recommend like other products that you might want to shop for. And unfortunately, I broke that. So now at the bottom of the page, it just says like other stuff you might like. And then there's nothing there. So all of our monitoring tools are going to notice this from varying kind of aspects. And we're going to see that stuff flood into ServiceNow. There's some features in ServiceNow that are not generative AI focused that are built around trying to help pull together multiple symptoms of the same issue, which might be called alerts, into one group. And so we're going to show kind of how does that happen. In parallel, we had some automation that was registering a change request into ServiceNow for the code change that I made, right? And it brought in actual details of the code that I changed using another one of ServiceNow's products. We're going to be able to leverage all this data to help us make faster decisions about how to fix this problem. Okay. So that's the context. Something's broken. Bunch of monitoring tools are noticing. ServiceNow already knew there was a code change that happened. And we're going to jump into what does that look like in terms of how we can fix that. And then once we just walk through a little bit about how GenAI can help us to fix that more quickly, we'll come over to another area and we'll work a little bit on, so then what do we do from there in terms of if we want to extend that a bit, okay? So if I'm a developer, one of the things that is a RapDev kind of element of our ethos is that we like to meet people where they are and the tools they're comfortable in. So a lot of the incidents that we run and a lot of like when we implement this for customers, we're running incidents out of chat tools like Teams or Slack. In this case, I have a new Teams channel that popped up. So if I'm a developer, I might not even be in ServiceNow. I might not even know about anything else that's happening. What is all the underlying data? For people who are used to ServiceNow, they can be in there. That's fine. But if I'm a developer and maybe that's not my everyday tool that I'm using, then this is an opportunity for me to be brought into that kind of shared context that we can all have, right? And so we get an initial message here that says there's an incident, right? I'm going to open that incident up while I'm reading through this. So it's telling us there's an incident. It tells us a bunch of stuff that's like technical kind of details, right? It's like, oh, there's this metric that's not doing well. There's some impacted services. There's a group of alerts. There's all this stuff that's happening. AI helps to bring something together for us here, which is an explanation of the earliest alert that was kind of the initial problem from this group of symptoms, right? And so it's bringing that to us and it's saying, here's an explanation of that. The first thing that it notes is that it looks like there's a mistake in the code that's causing an infinite loop. And that means that because the code is looping there, it looks like it's running, but whenever anything tries to retrieve those recommended products, it's going to be blank. So if we look at our website real quick, for example, just to quickly highlight kind of what this looks like, you see there's this you may also like section down here. It's blank, right? That's the problem. So it tells us right here, you should probably look at the application code and figure out that logic that had a loop in it and figure out why it's endlessly looping. It's saying that as a result, we can have issues with like resource exhaustion. We maybe should have given more, resources to those services to be able to handle a situation like this. But it's honestly not what we wanted anyway. So it's giving us its best guess at what the problem is here. So this is a case where how we do this in short is we're pushing a bunch of context to the LLM. which is the model, the GenAI model. We're pushing a bunch of context about the alerts that we got, the change request that was registered for the code change that was made. We push that to the LLM and we say, hey, based on all this stuff, can you help us understand an explanation of the earliest alert, right? And that's what we get back. So from here, we can start handling this issue. And I'm going to run through a couple of these things while we head on to the next thing. But I'm going to say I'll take this one. It's my own commit. I made the code change, so I'm going to do a couple of things here. We have a few different options of things that we can do. I'm going to skip past like anything else. We just do the work note on the incident. That's fine. Based on what we've seen so far, it seems likely that the most immediate thing that we should do is roll back that change that we made that is causing the loop to happen, right? And so we can ask, and here again, we're using some AI. It's not as generative AI focused, but we're using some AI elements to help bring together what are the best actions that I could take to help respond to this. And I see the one right here that I probably want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do that while we go, because it's going to take it probably 60 seconds to do that rollback. So I'm going to say, hey, run that rollback, which is going to fix the system temporarily while the code is technically wrong, right? The code that we stored, that we built the service on, and it's now running is wrong, but we can do a manual rollback by telling the tool that's running the service, run the last version of the service that you had before this. That's what we're doing, right? So it's a temporary, it's a Band-Aid fix, what we just did here. So it's going to roll back that deployment that we did, and it's going to put it on an old version. But that does not fix the fact that this is currently broken, right? So we'll skip through a bit of this without explaining too much more. I am going to add a problem task, which is going to put a bug in the planning tool that our devs use. So in this case, the bug will get assigned to me, and it will add a bug that says, hey, you need to go fix the code that caused this problem, right? So we do that. On the incident side, we can see how ServiceNow is pulled together. This is part of ServiceNow features we're not really going deep into today, but ServiceNow has pulled together a lot of details here for us. It's grouping together all these alerts. It's letting us see, so we can see like the alert itself. It's letting us see not only the alert that initially caused this incident, but we can also see other alerts here. So this is where we see alerts that are in this group. Got a bunch of alerts in the group coming from a bunch of different sources. That's a part of the power of generative AI, is that if I'm coming in and I'm trying to triage this issue, let's say I wasn't the dev who made the code change, then that could be really challenging for me, right? Because I wouldn't have the context of what happened. ServiceNow is helping pull all of that together for us. So the second place that we're using some generative AI is on the root cause process. So one thing we're doing here is when we look at our change requests that we have here, it's bringing in a few different change requests and it's saying, hey, it might have been caused by one of these change requests that you have that was recently done to the service that was first affected by this set of issues, right? In there, we have some additional things that we're doing to be able to bring better visibility and holistic context to anyone who's looking at ServiceNow. What do I mean by that, right? In the description of the change, when this change is registered, it's programmatic. The code tool told ServiceNow, hey, there was a code change that was done, create a change request, right? ServiceNow's like, okay. The thing is, the code itself, the code changes themselves were actually sent over to ServiceNow and they're stored as part of the data model. But what if you don't read, like this, in this case, this service is written in Python. What if you don't read Python, right? The answer is easily solved by generative AI, where previously this was kind of a hard thing to solve for. Generative AI can look at exactly what was done. And we can see it says here, there was this original code. The comments are being changed here. And so it says in the original code, the infinite loop was commented out, but in the modified code, the comments have been swapped so that now it's going to put it into an infinite loop and it's going to log more errors, right? And so that is where all of this generated from. This is a powerful thing because it allows us to bring sometimes disparate parts of an organization who do entirely different functions within an organization, bring them together when they're looking at something like this. Because we might have more process-oriented people or less technical people who are looking at a change like this in ServiceNow, and they say, "I don't read Python. I don't know what these code changes mean." Gen AI can help us solve that problem and help break down barriers that often arise in organizations. So it's a tangible example of generative AI being useful. Um, we're going to move on because we want to get to the part where we're building something. You notice when I clicked over, my website is somewhat dynamic, so it actually refreshed and brought in those recommendations because I did that rollback. But you remember that was a band-aid. So we're gonna deal with the real fix later. And right now we're just doing a band-aid fix. What we want to do next is we actually want to say, hey, I've done everything that I need to do to deal with this problem. I'm actually going to resolve this incident, right? And the reason I want to do that is because I want to get to how can we extend this a bit further to bring us more value with generative AI. So it sends us this card. It says you need to fill out what you did to fix it. So I'm going to say programmatically rolled back the code chain, or we'll say the service to an old version, created a bug for the actual code fix. I'm going to submit that. And then on the channel side, we'll see that pop up. It'll also update the incident in ServiceNow, obviously. And then we notice that we get this AI summary of what happened, right, as well in the channel. So that anybody who comes to this channel later, who might not want to read through the history of any chatter that happened if I'm collaborating with other people to solve the problem, it takes, again, the context of all of the work notes, all of the chatter in the channel, everything like that, all of the related alerts, all of those root cause pieces, pushes that to the model and says, hey, I need a quick explanation of the salient points of what happened here, right? And so this is where generative AI, you notice that there are some things that are consistent. We're not making decisions based on AI in this case. And the reason why is because there are still a lot of this stuff is still newer technology. There are cases where it's not going to produce exactly the same result every time. And so, in terms of applying this, we tend to use it more as, we could call it like using it as a mech suit versus using it as a robot to do the job for us, right? And so that's how we really see a lot of the immediate use, like the low hanging fruit of making this more useful. But now I need to jump over to what are we going to build? Because we're going to go build something now. Let's go back to our incident. And if we look at our incident, since it was resolved, it closed all those alerts, everything like that. But it also generated a post-incident report, okay? The post-incident report comes in. It looks like this, right? Is this the most useful thing? Like, it's honestly, the part that it generated is just this. It basically took the description and dumped it into the summary. And then the impact is blank because it didn't bring anything in there. And then it said, it basically just took my exact resolution note, right? And it put it into this box. What we're going to do is we're actually going to build something really quickly. So I can show you a little bit of under the hood here of how can we build something in the next few minutes here that would actually generate a really nice looking and more useful explanation of this incident and help frame up a useful postmortem for us to prevent this from happening again. Okay, so we're going to jump into that now. Please feel free to drop in questions. I know we're going kind of fast, but I want to make sure we get through to the end of building the flow that we want to build. So hopefully that's making sense so far. So we'll jump over. We're going to make a new flow. We're going to say generate post-mortem. Okay? So we'll say I want to build this flow. And we're going to add a trigger that happens when a new post-incident review record is created. Okay? So this flow is basically just a logical progression of things that we want to do whenever this happens. So we'll say post-incident review is created, and we'll add a filter to say that the incident on the post-incident review should not be empty. We make that trigger. Now, what do we want to do every time that one of these gets generated or one of these records gets created so we can generate a nice postmortem? So what we'll do is we have already, as a building block of that other thing I just showed you where it spits out the summary of everything that happened, we have already something for that, which is called a incident summary, right? And so if we look back at that, that is a subflow. So we'll say incident summary. It might take a second. Let's do incident. I think it was loading. There we go. Build incident summary. So we want to build this incident summary. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow us to quickly gather all the context about the incident that we're dealing with. So we're going to just give it the incident that we want to build a summary for from the trigger of our flow, right? The next thing we need to do is we need to feed that summary context, all of that context, to a model and ask it to summarize that, right? So the summary prompt thing is just getting all of the context. Hopefully that makes sense. It's getting all of the related data, everything like that, all of the work notes, everything from teams. And what we're going to do is then we're going to get an LLM completion prompt here. And we're just going to directly take the prompt that that incident summary thing gave us, right? Hopefully this is making sense. Feel free to drop questions in if you have them as we go. And for this, I'm going to use GPT-4o, and I'll give it a little more breathing room for how much it can give me back. Okay, that's what the max tokens is for. So we'll do that. The next thing we need to do is we need to add another step that will do an LLM completion to build the HTML, because that is rich text. The field that is on the post-incident review, it's HTML. So an added bonus here is not only am I going to get a really pretty post-incident review, but also I don't have to spend any time coding HTML. Honestly, just on a personal note, I really hate HTML. And so this is like, having a robot to do the dishes or something that you hate, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. I'm going to use, for this one, I'm going to mix it up a little. And this is something that's cool because by having a controller like this, where we can use multiple other models, we can easily switch to like another model. We can say, oh, I'm going to do this through Anthropic, and I'm going to give this one a good bit of response as well. But we need to figure out what our prompt is going to be. So the first thing is we need to add our incident summary, and then we're going to add a bit of context above it. So we get our incident summary from the completion that came back from step 2. And then we're going to give it a little bit of a prompt here. Our prompt, we can do this a lot of different ways. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say something along the lines of using the incident summary below, generate an incident post-mortem. Okay. And we'll say document that I can edit and publish. Yeah. And we can add a little bit more detail here. I have already my company's colors. So I'm going to say provide it in HTML. We'll say RapDev's colors are, and I have those already from another project that I was working on. I also need an image that I can use, like if I want to give it an image. So you just upload whatever images you have, and you can put those easily into ServiceNow. So use the RapDev logo as needed, and we'll give it an example. I don't want it to be that big, maybe like 150. And then I cheated a little bit on this because I asked an LLM before this. I said, hey, give me tips for how to make a nice, professional, polished HTML document, right? And so it actually gave me some really useful tips that we can use. And I'm just going to drop in those tips here as well, so that we have those, so that we get back something that has, and you'll notice we can scan through a little of what this is doing. It's saying, make the document look professional and polished. Let it begin with a brief table of basic details about the incident. Design tips is giving tips about typography, spacing, et cetera. Visual, subtle separators. It's just giving it tips about like kind of graphic design types of stuff, right? Content tips. I said, use context where you can. Include brief explanations. If you can add visualizations, do that, right? In this case, we don't have a ton of visualizations, but we'll add these tips. And then the last thing I said, I really want a call to action for future improvements to be included. And I said, only return the HTML without any markdown formatting. So that just makes sure that it's just giving me the HTML back, right? So we'll build that. And now we need an action to update our record. So we're going to go grab update record, and we're going to get our trigger record. And we're going to update. There's this thing called edit your incident summary. And so I don't want to edit HTML directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a quick script. This is the only scripting that we actually have to do, besides using some of the building blocks that we have in here. And it's just to get, I'll explain it as I'm doing it. It's just to get the completion from there and then return only that. So it's literally just getting the completion from step 3 and then putting it directly in here without any kind of weird formatting or anything like that. So we do that, okay? So let's save this. And now what we want to do is we actually want to test it. So we have our post-incident report over here. You remember what it looked like, right? It was basically just, I can click edit here so you can see exactly what it looks like. It's basically just this kind of blob of text, bunch of stuff that was copied from the incident. Impact is blank, and then it took my resolution note, right? It's not good enough for prime time, right? And this is a building block that ServiceNow provides that we can take, and in the past we might have developed a bunch of HTML or something like that. What we're going to do instead is we're going to now run a test on this incident and see how this works out. And hopefully it's pretty good. If it needs a lot of tweaks, then we might not have a lot of time to mess with it today. But we are going to go ahead and grab the incident number, and we'll do a test on it and see if we can find that. So it found that that record for the post-incident review. And you can see there's no cheating here. The edit your incident summary thing is that exact thing, right? It's kind of basic, kind of plain text, not a lot of formatting or anything like that. So we'll say, hey, let's run the test. And we'll give that a minute to complete. And then we can see kind of how did that HTML come back and get populated into that post-incident review. It usually takes a little bit of time when we're interacting with multiple models like this. We have a few steps in here, but you think about how long would it take to write HTML for something like this, how much that would cost the organization in terms of the time that we have to spend on stuff like that. And as Kyle mentioned earlier, there's definitely a very, very strong case to be made for the value that can be achieved with generative AI when we don't just use it for summarizing things, or we don't just use it for kind of these basic tasks, but we actually, and it says it completed. So let's go check out our post-incident report now. Oh, so now we have a RapDev logo. It actually generated some sections here. It looks like it's not perfect in this. I don't love the text. I think some of the text might have gotten wiped out in the, so I'll make a note for it to do like a different color of text. Some of the text is not perfect. I think part of this might be because the way that ServiceNow handles the theme. Let me try switching to light mode and see if that looks better. Yeah, that's a little better. So we can kind of see how did it spit out like different sections. It gave us a very nice description. It's doing even some little emojis in here, right? And we can iterate from here to get more dividers. We can give it different tips of how we want to. We can run a few examples of this and then just take the HTML and make it our standard. But it gives us a timeline of what happened. It gives us a root cause analysis, right? and it tells us, hey, there were a couple of change requests that were identified as possible root cause. The resolution steps, it says we implemented a temporary workaround. We adjusted some alert thresholds based on the context that it got from some of our alerts that came in, and we optimized the performance and ultimately got to a place where we could fix those other alerts. The incident resulted in some issues on a couple of our services, and it says our exact metrics are to be determined. Lessons learned. It tells us, hey, this is important to have robust monitoring, quick identification, rollback strategy is key, and it tells us some next steps. It even gives us some tips. It says, hey, if you want to contribute to this, and this part down here, the timeline, this is ServiceNow's out of the box thing, but it says if you want to contribute, please contact the DevOps team at devops@rapdev.io. And it even gave us some next steps here of things that we could do to help prevent this from happening again. So hopefully this has been helpful. We're coming up to the end of our time, and we've made it just in time. But like I said, if we run this a few times and we see maybe some slightly variant versions of this that we see, we like one of them a lot, we could take the HTML that it built, which if we look up here, we can see how complex some of this is. And if we click code, you can see it actually wrote the HTML code for this. This is where we can easily take something like this and turn it into a template that can be used for any PIR that gets created. And that way we have a repeatable and nice and polished example of how to make that happen.